Milford Public Schools September 11th Curriculum Committee. I'm proud to welcome you to today's special assembly to culminate our 8th grade study of the events of September 11th. We're honored to have here with us today one very special speaker who's taken time out of her busy schedule to be with us, and I promise we will hear from her in just a moment. But first, there are a few people I'd like to especially thank for making this day possible. Mr. B.I. Pepe of the 9/11 Tribute Center for support from the very beginning. Ms. Rachel Rowley, who initiated Milford's contact with the Tribute Center and supported the rest of us in developing our 9/11 units. Mrs. Harris Brewer, who is our coordinator, Principal Karamis, Mrs. Vecino, Mr. Blessing, and Mr. Dan Petrowski for making, and our faculty here at West Shore for making this presentation possible. I was right here in Milford at West Shore Middle School when I first heard word of the attacks. I was sickened, I was infuriated, I was horrified. I, like the rest of the world that day, was simply floored. I will never forget that morning, and that day as one of my closest friends worked in the Pentagon, and I would not find out he was all right until 5:30 that evening. But as I look around at all of you today and watching from East Shore, I realize that none of you were born on that fateful day. It is part of your history, a part of our nation's story, and our goal as educators is that we never forget that day. Last night I was on the Tribute Center's website when I saw the simple question on Mr. I. Pepe's own page. Who better to tell this story than the people who experienced it? And that's exactly why we're here today. Mrs. Judy Keane, who lost her husband on that day, will share her story with us. I cannot begin to thank her for being here, and an honor to hear her story. Mrs. Judy Keane.
So what we're going to do is watch a video first, and I will tell you that some of the video is a little bit graphic, but I don't think it's probably anything worse than what you've seen on the news. This was done for the Richard M. Keane Foundation, named after my husband, which Wethersfield created after the events of 9/11. And we have been in business now for 22 years, and we have built a sports center, a smaller gym, an instructional gym, if you will, fitness room and meeting room. Then after that was finished in 2008, we decided that we wanted to put all of our funds towards after-school programs. So each of our elementary schools now have an after-school enrichment program. And kids sign up for the classes, and they actually have to pay a small token fee. But there's gym activities, there's chess, there's cooking, art, science, whatever you want. There's all kinds of programs. So there are 4 afternoons a week in the schools. So this video was created when we had our 20th anniversary remembrance at the Historical Society in Wethersfield. And it was a room filled with all of the memorabilia from that day, newspapers, books, pictures, flags, and I have some of the quilts that were up that day as well. So this video was in a separate room where people could get the information about what happened. So the beginning is what happened that day, and then our group, our board members from the Richard M. Keane Foundation went down to New York to the JFK, where all the pieces of the World Trade Center were stored. So we started going down in 2006. So that was 5 years after the event, and we had finally gotten permission to take a piece of steel back to our sports center. And that was a big, big deal. I wrote more letters to get that to happen. And in the end, we had to pick out 5 pieces that we liked in this hangar, and they would let us know later which pieces we could take, which one piece we could take. And in the end, they gave us 2. So we were the first nonprofit in the United States to be able to take steel that had been at the World Trade Center. So that was really, really special for us. I urge you to come to Wethersfield sometime to see our pieces of steel in our gym. It's just beautiful. Okay, so this is the video that went along with our 20th anniversary remembrance of 9/11.
This Justin, we're looking at obviously very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this.
I got what you watched the World Trade Center, and suddenly it was the second sort of war came out of the sky, and everyone just looked right up, and another plane came and just barreled into the other tower. Schoolyard across the street, and I remember there were kids that were being evacuated from the schoolyard. And one of the girls looked up into the sky and she said, "Turn on, Daddy, look, they're doing it on purpose."
I could see above where light had gone. Really bright red, like coals on a campfire. We were later learned that the jet fuel gets to about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
The Trade Center is so tall and it moves over you that it looks like you're almost on top of it when you're looking up at it. And you can see these people almost like little specks coming through the glass. And Jim Fugras, the guy whose partner was in, had this camera and he was tightening the shot and tightening the shot. And at one point he kind of said, "Oh my God, there's people up there." And some of them were waving what looked to be maybe shirts or jackets out the window, trying to get some of his attention. I remember his daughter and his wife were there, and they were working, and maybe they needed help, maybe there was a pet, or maybe there was like a helicopter or plane, and there was some kind of rescue operation. And then suddenly you saw people one after the other jumping up in the ground. People were flailing against the leaves, they fell, almost as if they had second thoughts. I was absolutely horrified.
It's almost like a Russian style explosion. And I can't, I'll tell you, I can't see that second tower.
In the interest of time, we've decided to stop the video, and I'm sure you've seen scenes like this on the news, as I said. So you won't get to see when we went to pick the steel up, but we'll move along. So my husband, Richard Keane, was on the 99th floor of Tower 1. So you saw where all the smoke and the fire was. He was just above that. The plane hit at about between 92nd and 96th floors. And he was on either the 99th or 100 because the office that he was in had stairwells leading between the two floors. He did not work there. He was just there for a meeting, as were many other people. Dick worked for Marsh McLennan, and he was in the Hartford office where we live outside in Wethersfield. And he was there for an exciting meeting with Marsh McLennan. He was thrilled to go. And I was not sure where the meeting was being held. I didn't know it was at the World Trade Center. So I didn't know for quite a while that he had been in the World Trade Center until somebody from his Hartford office called me later in the day. And of course, then I knew we were in big trouble because he had been there. I don't know what's on the screen right now. Okay, next one. Okay, I just want to give you a little bit of history about the World Trade Centers and why they were so important, why the terrorists really wanted to attack in that particular location. I mean, they could have gone directly to Washington, D.C., and there were planes that were going to go there, but the first one hit the towers. I think it was 1624, Peter Minuet purchased the island of Manhattan, and it's not very big. It's like 24 miles long in New York City. And it was there that the commerce began. They say that he paid the Native Americans knives and whatever. Really what it was cooking pans, knives, so that they could survive. But that's 1624. This is a picture of the World Trade Center. Can I go back? Just so I can see where we are. Okay. All right, this is Lower Manhattan, which is the center of world commerce in the United States. If you look at the lower part here, you can see this is Battery Park. If anybody's gone to Hamilton, anybody seen the play Hamilton or read the book or any of that? Okay, this is where the Revolutionary War took place in New York. This is where the World Trade Center is. It was not beloved at all by many because there was already property there, and it was what was called Radio Row. It was small businesses that had to all be taken down to build this World Trade Center. But the World Trade Center concept was the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City, they all wanted to have huge buildings that they could carry on world commerce. Okay, all of the debris that they took from here ended up going into the Hudson River. And it created what's called Battery Park City. So if you go to the World Trade Center today, it's not on the side of the river. That used to be the beach. West Street, which runs right down here, used to be the beach on that side of Manhattan. But now it's Battery Park City. It is the highest taxed area in New York. It's beautiful apartment buildings, it's financial centers, but it brings in more tax than any other area in New York City. Originally, they thought they were going to put it on the East River, And they decided to put it on the Hudson River. And by the way, this is why this area was chosen to be the World Trade Centers, because right here is New York Harbor. So it was easily accessible for trade. Okay. And here's what we have, the buildings that were erected in I think they opened in early 1970s. Not too many New Yorkers liked the look of them right away. They preferred the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, so they said to people, we've got the boxes, now where are the buildings? But they became iconic in New York City and everybody loved them after a while. So these boats are on New York Harbor. Okay, another image. They were very tall. They were 1/4 mile high in the sky. That's 4 football fields high. And there were so many tales about these buildings. When the wind blew, there was a sway that was factored in when they were building it. And the building literally tipped, and the toilets would slosh on the upper floors. So it was so high that the wind could take it away. Okay, this is an aerial from a view of the Tower 1 and Tower 2. You know what Tower 1 in any picture because it's got the aerial at the top, the antenna. This is a hotel. It was a Marriott hotel. This entire block, it was 16 acres. That entire block was decimated. It was all debris at the end. Another picture of the towers. Okay, this is a very important image because this is where everybody would gather. It's called, this sphere in the center of this park is called the Koenig Sphere. Towers 2 and 1 are on there, and the Marriott Hotel. The thing is that everybody would meet there. If you were going to meet somebody in New York City, you would go there. By the way, the World Trade Centers had their own zip code. They were so big. Now, underneath the trade centers, there were 3 levels of stores, a post office, doctor's office, dentist's office, a grocery store. It was a world in itself. So that's why they had a designation as a zip code. This Koenig Sphere is very important to New York City, to the people who gathered there. And I don't know if you can see, but there's picnic tables all around here. And they would have concerts there, conferences, whatever. Everybody loved this park. I don't know if you know it or if you got in your studies that there was an attack on the World Trade Centers on Tower 1 in 1993. 6 people died in that attack. The same terrorist group planted a rented truck filled with fertilizer in the basement, and then they detonated it with a cell phone. It took all day for everybody to evacuate from inside the building. And there are tales about that as well. But they did capture the terrorists at the time. The terrorists rented the van, whatever it was, in New Jersey. And then they filled it with the fertilizer, as I say, and drove it to the World Trade Center. And afterwards, they went back to the rental office to get their money back because they said the van had been stolen. Well, in the meantime, the FBI had found out from the license plate on the van that was still visible where the truck came from. So they were waiting for them at the rental place. So they all went to jail, and some of them are still there. Okay, you just saw these images of the tower. Tower 1 was the first to be hit. And the terrorists came from Boston on this particular flight. And they went across Massachusetts and down the Hudson River. So they used the Hudson River as their guide. And they waited until they had the perfect day, which it was an unbelievably gorgeous day. Because they did not know how to use all the machinery on the planes, they needed to look out the window and see where they were. And it was a spectacularly blue sky day. They call it, pilots call it severe clear. It was so bright blue, there were no clouds in the sky at all. And that was the day they chose. Was hit by the plane at about 9 o'clock. Then an hour after, started to fall. I can't believe that they thought they were really gonna collapse, but the buildings came down, believe it or not, 110-story buildings in 10 seconds. If you were standing on the plaza when the first building came down, you would have been blown back hundreds of feet. There was an earthquake. I mean, it registered on the Richter scale as an earthquake. It was so powerful when the buildings came down. Now, I just want you to remember that the buildings contained office equipment, not quite what we have today. There were no computers on the desks because they hadn't been mainstreamed in business yet. But there were desks, chairs, lunchrooms filled with food and refrigerators and all that. And there was a place at the top of Tower 1 called the Windows on the World. And there was a conference going on. People came from all over the country to this particular meeting. And I don't remember what the product was that they were discussing, but nobody above the 92nd floor survived. So all the people above that level died. One of the things that happened when the plane hit was it went directly through the center of the building, knocking out all the stairways, the elevators, everything, every means of egress for anybody on the upper floors. And as you saw in the video, there were people that were waving flags and whatever, and people that ended up jumping because it was either a choice of burning to death or dying by falling. It was horrible. So what is this? This is the implosion from up above of the second tower. So Tower 1 was the last one to fall. This is some of the images of what was left afterwards. Oh, this is the Pentagon. I'm sorry. This is the Pentagon. So we talked about two planes. The third plane hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And the fourth plane was probably heading to either the White House or the Capitol. But the passengers on the plane, once the plane had been hijacked, stormed the cockpit and took the plane down. And it landed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where I have not been yet, so I should go there. And this is New York City in the debris. You would never imagine the pile of debris. It was 9 stories high above ground. Now remember, there were 3 stories below ground. So those were all crushed. And then everything above there had to land on top of it. There were fires burning for 9 months in this debris. The odor in New York City was absolutely horrendous. It was horrible, horrible. It took forever, 9 months, to get all the debris out. Actually, that was a lickety-split considering the depths of the debris. They had people moving debris and recovering bodies for 9 months. People were actually identified after that. They recovered some bones after that. We did not know that Mr. Keane was really dead for about 6 months. And then they identified DNA that my children had given and found a little shard of bone, a small piece of bone. And that's how we knew that he had died. More images of the devastation. It was horrible. Honing Sphere. It survived. It was damaged, but it was survived. And it was actually brought to Battery Park. Remember that Battery Park area that we talked about earlier, the southernmost tip of Manhattan? That's also where you can take the ferry to Liberty Island, Ellis Island, up to Staten Island. It's a very important spot, and during the Revolutionary War, a fort was built there, so it's a national park as well. So the Koenig Sphere went there until about 4 years ago, and now it's back overlooking the World Trade Center in a raised area above the memorial, and it's called Liberty Park. And Liberty Park was built. There's a huge Greek Orthodox church there that's in the process of being rebuilt. It was destroyed. But that Liberty Park was actually erected for the residents of the area. Because remember I told you Battery Park City was there? This area of southern tip of New York, of Manhattan, was a huge residential area, all kinds of apartments and all that. Many of the residents of that area lost everything. Their apartments were completely destroyed, and their furniture, everything. So they were not back, many of them, for 2 years. And when they went back, now they had to clean up in their apartments, and there was like a foot of debris in many places that was considered hazardous waste, so they had to hire somebody to come and get all that debris out of the house. Okay. This is the picture of my husband. And immediately after, my children, I have 5 boys, so they all went down to New York City with this poster. And we thought we were so smart. Certainly he was wandering around in the area, and we were going to find him. Well, 2,973 people died on the World Trade Center that day. Everybody had the same idea. So there were posters all over the place. If a car didn't move, it was covered with posters. If a building or a tree was there, it was covered with posters. So we were not the only ones that were posting these. And if you ever go to the memorial, when you first, in the museum, when you first walk down the ramp to get into the lower level, because remember, it was 3 stories down, and that's where they created the museum. You'll see flashing on the walls holograms of all of the posters. It's so funny, the first time my children and I went to the museum, it was a week that was just for families. And the first thing we saw when we went down was this poster. So it was flashing just as we walked down. This is a much better picture of him. And this is when our oldest granddaughter was born, and she is now in vet school. So it's been a long time. I just want you to know about the patriotism of the nation at the time. Everybody was flying flags, and you know, you'd meet somebody on the street and they'd just be in tears. It was such an emotional time. But as we drove down to New York City, sometimes on every single street corner, there were crowds of people with signs saying, "Stay strong, we're thinking of you. Thank you to the police. Thank you to the fire department." And those are the people that actually recovered the site. This is, I don't know why that's in there again. That's the Pentagon. Am I going the wrong way? No. And this is probably in New Jersey. And you can see, a year later, they started with the beams of light on July 4th and on September 11th. And people would gather to look. And I noticed in your classroom you have the same sign, same flag of heroes, and all the names of people who died that day are on there. So when you get back to your classroom, look for Mr. Keane's name on there. Actually, in Weathersfield, there were 4 people. 2 other young men that Dick had coached in baseball. They were 25 years old. Dick was 54. But he had coached them, and we knew them in town, and families got to be very close after that. And there was another man who died they were both in the South Tower, Tower 2. And another gentleman whose son moved to Weathersfield recently, in the last 5-6 years. And their dad also had died that day. So he's now serving on our board, and we include him. So there are 4 people who have a story of 9/11 in Weathersfield. This was a vigil on September 16th, and it was just a few friends that were going to get together across the street. I live on the town green, so they were going to get together and just light some candles and sing some songs. And I got a call a few hours after we started the planning, and whoever it was, the recreation department said, you know, you're going to have a lot more people, so make some more song sheets. So we did. We printed more song sheets. And then the police called and said, we're going to handle parking tonight. And I said, you know, what is parking? You know, why are you worried about parking? There's maybe only going to be 200 people there. And they said, no, 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 no. In the end, there were 5,000 people that gathered on the green with candles that night. And it was one of the most beautiful, I get chills every time I think about it. It was really gorgeous. These pictures are not good, but, and one of the television stations, after everybody left, the backstop was behind the speakers. They lighted up these posters that, they're just bed sheets really, that a friend had put up there, one's faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and peace. And one of the things that I wanted at that time, and I started right away, please do not look for retaliation in Afghanistan. And you know, people wanted to wipe the country out. There was a lot of hatred towards Muslims and Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, where some of the terrorists came from. There were a group of 19 terrorists, and they were all young men. And this was a part of the world that was absolutely very poor. The impoverished areas of these countries are just, we can't even imagine it. No water, no electricity, barely able to have a tent over their heads. And along came Al-Qaeda and said to them, listen, we will give your family lots and lots of money if you come and join us. And of course they did, and it was in Afghanistan that Osama bin Laden had set up his training center. And it's there that these kids were brainwashed. They were made to believe that the United States was horrible. Now, whatever political party you're in, or there or here, that had nothing to do with it. These were kids that were so needy that they were thrilled to be able to have a goal in life. And in this case, the goal was that they would go to heaven and their families would have lots of money after they died. So I don't know that any of that happened. Okay, this is the new memorial, and this is not the museum. This is outside of the museum. How many of you have been to New York to see the memorial or the museum? Okay, more of you have got to go. It is very, very impressive. It's, this is the South Tower, I think. Oh no, that's the North Tower. On the South Tower, there's a pool for this, where the South Tower was and one where the North Tower was. And the parapet all the way around has the names of everybody who died that day. So the South Tower has, not as many people died in the South Tower because they were able to get out. Many of them got out as soon as they saw Tower 1 being hit, and many of them were able to escape because the plane hit on an angle and they, the stairways were still available for people to get out. So on the South Tower, all the names of the people that were in the South Tower, the plane that hit the South Tower, and everybody from the Pentagon, and all the firefighters that were killed. There were 343 firefighters killed that day. Many of them are now dying of illnesses related to the cleanup and all the debris and the odor. It would just ruin your lungs every time you were there. You'd be coughing and coughing, and the smell, as I said, was just awful. Anyway, so all those names are around the South Tower. And the North Tower, there's so many people that died that it consumes the entire north parapets, except for the people who were killed during that 1993 attack. And there was one woman who was pregnant then, and it's her name, I think the name was Rodriguez, and her unborn baby. So they acknowledged the baby on the parapet as well. This was designed by Michael Irod, the whole plaza. He's an incredible architect. There was an architectural contest to see see all of the designs and which one would win. So there's Mr. Keane's name. Now I'm going to tell you, if you do go, there's a tradition, and I think it goes back to Native Americans, that water is very important. So when you go, there's a ledge of water underneath. And by the way, the water continues 24/7. In the summer, it's cooled, and in the winter, it's warmed. So you tap the water, and then you rub it across somebody's name. And that's supposed to be a connection to that person that you've now built. So whenever I take my tours around the memorial, I always tell everybody, reach in and get a little tap of water and connect with Dick. He would love to meet you. This is every year they have the reading of the names, and I don't know how, but somebody captured this moment when Dick's name was being read. So this is his image, and that's a special picture to me. Here's the beams of light that go up in New York every year, and I think it is on July 4th and the anniversary of 9/11. But it's heartwarming to the people who live in New York to see the towers up again. Now, there is one tower, and it's called One World Trade Center, and it's all commercial property. But it is on the site where it's near the site where the Tower 1 was. And it took a long time to get it up because there was so much disagreement about what it should be, how it should be, etc. And it's got an aerial on the roof, just like Tower 1. You actually can go up there. It's very commercial to me, but you can go up there and spend $15 to rent an iPad and look out. The iPad tells you what you're looking at and 360 degrees. What is this? Oh, that's it at night. It is beautiful. And the tower is 1,776 feet tall. Why do you think? Oh, okay. Okay. Why do you think? Close. It is close to the old tower. But anybody else have an idea of why 1,776? That's what? I still didn't hear. No? No? That's right. It's our date of independence. So they made sure that it was 1776 feet tall. Okay, we're almost there. I just wanted to show you the other buildings that they compared this to. And remember I said they didn't want boxes, although this one's not a box exactly. But people wanted something more classic, you know, anyway, in New York. But that's the One World Trade Center. So it is 1/4 mile tall. This is in the museum. And this is the wall that you first encounter when you go in. And it says, "No day shall erase you from the memory of time." Behind this wall are the remains of all of the people who have not yet been identified. So it may be small bones or whatever, but there's no way of getting DNA from them right now. Remember, these pieces, shards of bone and the bodies were out in the elements for a year. And DNA deteriorates after time. So these are all stored behind here. Only family members are allowed in there. And there's a medical examiner available if you'd like to talk to them about what they found. And, you know, we were called 4 or 5 times to say, oh, they found another little piece of bone. And finally, one of the options was that we could say, don't call now, we'll call you someday. And we had already had 2 burials, and I didn't want to keep doing that over and over again. So someday, when we decide, we'll all go down and get the remains that they have of Dick and bring them back for one final burial, I hope. But as I say, this is a beautiful spot for family members. There's a nice room to sit quietly and think or cry or whatever, out of the view of the general public. This building is called the Obelisk. This right here. What does it look like? A bird. It looks like a dove, ready to take off. Yes? A pigeon? Somebody said, I think it's a dove. But the contractor, the designer, was Salvatore Calafatate. I can never say his last name, Calafate. Anyway, he wanted this to be winged. So in the morning when the sun would come out, the wings would go open and close at night. However, it went so far over budget, it was 4 times over budget to leave it stationary. So this was billions of dollars to create this obelisk. But does anybody know what's underneath there?
Like a mall?
A vault?
Mall.
Well, there's a mall, but the more important thing, and very high-end mall, below it is the transportation center, which was destroyed when the buildings came down. So there was a train to New Jersey, the PATH train, there were subways, buses. That was where you got your train to wherever. And I can tell you in the last, I think it was about 5 years ago, they finally opened the subway station there. And getting off the subway, it says WTC, and I was just elated to see that it was finally back. Okay, this is our project, and I don't know if you can actually see it here, but this is one of the pieces of steel that we were able to bring back from New York, from that Pan Am hangar, and you could actually, we picked that and a couple of other pieces, and one of the pieces is now in the museum, so that was not coming to Wethersfield. But we have another piece on the wall. This is our piece of steel, and it's beloved. People come and just sit there and think about it. And this is our gym that we created. And kids and older people, everybody in the community is welcome to use it. It's basketball, it's fitness, it's they're doing Zumba, I think. Not happily, but they're doing it. And we're back to the end. So, I just want to open it for questions. Oh, yes, yes. Oh, and we never passed the books around. Yeah. Why don't you hold up each one of them? These, after 9/11, I told you that it was a very patriotic and emotional time for everybody. And one of the things people did was they made quilts. So this is a quilt that was done by the kindergarten teacher for my children. And you can see, it's an American flag. The tiny, tiny little stitches that she put into this is amazing. This one was made by the Hospital for Special Care, where my daughter-in-laws worked. And this is supposed to be the towers. And by the way, there were 95 different ethnicities in the tower that day of people who died. People from nations all around the world. This other one was made by a children's group. And the stars and the banner are visible. I do have some books that we can pass around if we have a couple of minutes. Maybe you can send the books around, but there's also this box of debris that I am very, very careful about. So Mr. Ackrey's going to walk it around so you can see. This is what was left after the towers came down. And if you look in there, it's pieces of cement, it's pieces of everything, and there's nails, and that box, by the way, had an odor for about 4 years. It's gone now. I wish it wasn't, because I would like you to smell that acrid smell. Okay, who has questions? I want my books back, by the way, at the end. Nobody has a question? Okay. You know, I'm sad that you don't have questions, though, because over the years, kids have had all kinds of questions. Yes?
Oh yeah, is there any, like, say,
Well, we do have memorials, yes, in town, you mean? Well, the steel is really our memorial, and we did have a picnic every September until the 20th anniversary, where people would gather on the town green and kind of replicate what we did in that very first year. Nobody else has questions? You should, because this is something that is historic, and although you didn't live it, go home tonight and ask your parents or anybody older, and you know, they may cry when they tell you the story that where they were that day. Everybody remembers where they were when they heard about it. It's like when John Kennedy died in my generation, earlier, when I was a student, I was in high school. I can remember exactly where it was. Okay, quick. The question is, do we know how he died? We don't. We don't. That's my first reaction, my stomach fell. My stomach fell and I was just terrorized. I didn't know what to do, you know? Somebody had a question over here? I was working, I'm a nurse and I was at work. And one of the patients showed me an image on the television of the tower being hit by a plane. And I had no idea I was connected to that at all. He was 54. Yeah. And we had 5 children. Okay. Sounds like you gotta go.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Judy Keane, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go back to the second block. Thank you, everybody. My class for 4th period, come in here.